Good afternoon, I'm Mark Brody. I'm an Emerson alum and I'm also an affiliated faculty, an adjunct here at Emerson College. I teach digital storytelling and nonprofit management. So here's a question. Who in this room has one of these fancy little things? Anybody? Here's what's amazing about this device. In your hand, you hold the means by which we can democratize storytelling. In the old days, all the stories came from the powerful people. Well, that ship sailed. We have one of these. So if you got this, and some of this, now we can change the world, and we can do it through storytelling. Now, here's the thing. There's certain formats in which stories are created. A story is not this happened, and this happened, and then this happened, and then this other thing happened. It really breaks down to and, but, and therefore. If it's just this and this and this, okay, that's a report, nobody cares. But if something happens, it's a typical Friday in Washington and a group of people are together. But then something strange occurs. Therefore, there's an action. Now we've got a story. And when we look at story, there's a few components that have to be within it in order for it to be a story. There has to be a character. The character has to have some form of transformation. So we see the character when they start, and we see the character when they end, and there's a difference. In the process, the audience is typically transported. It's sort of like you read a book and you're visualizing what you're seeing. You're having that daydream where you're actually there in the story. There's other elements where hopefully we make the viewer empathetic to the character and what the character is feeling, and in the process, we feel that too. So how as educators can we use this human phenomena to our advantage to pass on lessons and to build bridges? Well, one of the programs we have at Emerson through Pathways is the Rediscover Rosarito program. And what we do is we take our students down across the southern border into Rosarito, Mexico. Now, if you've paid attention to the news recently, you've probably seen that the left won't speak with the right and the right won't speak with the left, and that's really why we're here today. Well, one of the ways we go to address that is to bring students to Mexico and let them see with their own eyes. There's an adage in storytelling to show, don't tell. Because if I tell you something, you may or may not listen. But if I show you, then it becomes your truth, and it's your truth, and you'll believe that truth. So this is exactly what we do. We take our students to Rosarito, Mexico. We show them what's going on. We embed them with local Mexican film students, and we have them create stories. So there's two things going on, actually. In order to create a story, you have to understand what's happening, and you have to engage with the local population. So through a composite crew, Emerson and Mexican filmmakers, they actually get to experience some elements of that culture that they normally wouldn't get the opportunity to do. Think of it as the difference between a tourist versus a traveler. They are there, they're seeing things, they're experiencing, and they're working with a group of people that's not from their own place, Emerson College. In the process, they're experiencing something unique. While doing this, they're creating a story. So to create a story, you have to understand the characters and their plight, their challenge, what they're trying to overcome, and this is exactly what we do. So when we look at building bridges, when we look at intercultural exchanges, one of the best way to do this, in my own experience, is to take people somewhere, get away from that tourism thing, get involved with the culture, and do it through trying to understand what's happening in forms of a story. If it's a report, well, I went here, I had fun, the beach was great, the food was fantastic, yeah, big deal, nobody cares. But I went to this wonderful place, I met these people, I learned about the food, why the food's important, some of the challenges they had in actually getting that food, or whatever it might be. Now it's a story, and through the process of story, in the process of being empathetic to those people, we've now learned something, we've felt something, and we take that home and we turn that into our truth. So that's what we do at Digital Storytelling at Emerson College. I hope you all come back to Emerson and take my class. So I'm Mark Brody, let me pass the baton to our next panelist.
Just before Dr. Gregory starts speaking, we went through the PhD program together, and this is my ride or die from that program, and I'm so honored that she is here joining us today. So we wouldn't be here without each other, so Dr. Brittany Ray Gregory, my special honor goes to you.
Thank you, Sharifa. Sharifa really is my ride or die. She's actually my maid of honor in my wedding. So, yeah. I'm glad that Howard brought us together. So, like Sharifa mentioned, we went through Howard together. Our PhD program is Communications, Culture, and Media Studies. So that's like a broad range of things, but I think that we were really well trained in becoming storytellers especially for people whose voices are often silenced. At Howard, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of background on myself. At Howard, I studied gentrification in DC, specifically around HBCUs. For point of convenience and passion, I looked at Howard. So I have experience there. In my current daytime position, I'm a communications director for a nonprofit called Next Century Cities, and we work with local leaders who are committed to connecting their residents to affordable, reliable internet, and also providing them with the necessary skill set to really thrive in our digital society, like you mentioned. We have a lot of people have cell phones, computers, and we just really need this digital skill set to be able to move forward in society. Aside from that, that's my day job. I also am really interested in pop culture. So I think that's probably what I'm going to be talking about and maybe answering questions when we have the conversation with the audience from that frame. But I am really interested in how emerging media, and I put quotes around that because I don't know if it's really still emerging at this point, because we are using these social media platforms for going on 2 decades now. But I'm really interested in how emerging media has provided underrepresented populations with platforms to take charge of their narratives. Specifically for me, I'm interested in how Black women have been able to use emerging media to control the narrative or attempt to take control of the narrative. And you know, when we think about Issa Rae, who I'm happy to talk about all the time. I love Insecure. I watched Awkward Black Girl when I was in college, very much a pivotal part of my college career, looking at that with my classmates. Also, you think about Quinta Brunson. We're thinking about Abbott Elementary, because she came from Vine, and look at her now. But also some people that we may not be as familiar with. I'm happy to also talk about them, but just really looking at the role that emerging media can play in giving people a platform. Like you mentioned, you have a cell phone, you have a platform, is something that I'll be talking about or happy to answer questions about. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the forthcoming publication that Sharifa and I have been working on. There's a book that's coming out called Insecure, Awkward, and #Winning. It's finally coming out mid-December through Peter Lang. But Sharifa and I co-authored a chapter looking at the representation of gentrification in the HBO series Insecure. So again, really excited to talk about pop culture, but also happy to answer questions from the perspective of my day job, working at a nonprofit as a comms director, advocating for people that need access to internet.
Judith Kalel. No, I'm going to give a brief introduction. Judith Kalel, your film, we were grateful to have your film premiere at, not premiere, but shown at the pre-summit. At the so we had a premiere in the United States of your film, 15 Hours. So thank you so much for giving us some remarks about storytelling, in particular, amplifying the voice of refugees.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. And they told us we have 6 minutes. Please, somebody can do this or something like that, because I start talking, and this can be a disaster. Okay, yes, it's true. I'm a film director, and I know how important is storytelling and how is our responsibility as people who are explaining stories. In my films, I try to talk about social. I try to denounce the things that are unfair. But today I'm not talking about my films. I will be talking about 2 projects that we made in Blanquerna. I like very much that you talk about Rosarito. We have to visit, definitely. There are so long ago that we were talking about that we have to go to Rosarito. But then the pandemic and all this. But I would like also to share 2 projects that we made at the university, and I think that are very interesting and very important, because we have a big problem in all the world, but in Europe especially, with the refugees that come from not only the ones who come from Middle East, the ones who come from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Iraq, also all the people in Spain. We have all the people who come from Africa, and we have a lot of people who arrive there. They don't have anything. They have a lot of problems. They don't have the good policies to be safe. They don't have the opportunities. And also there are a lot of very young men and women, essentially men, who arrive without any father or mother or brother, who arrive alone. They are 16, 15, 17. And they are in the streets And sometimes they go to a refugee camp or to a refugee center, but they don't have this possibility of doing anything. Then from Blanquerna, we started to work in this 3 or 4 years ago, well, before the pandemic, I don't know, because the 2 years of the pandemic makes me, I don't know how many years. Yes, it's true. It's like, it's amazing. And we started to work with a project with an organization called Ojalá Projects. And the project was to go to Athens, to Greece, and to work with different groups of people who have, who are refugees, who live there, who have problems. And we made 3 different things. In first place, we made a documentary talking about what these people do when they arrive there, what the spaces, these squads where they live, and where they have this possibility of making things doing for them. And this documentary has been presented to different places, and this documentary was made by students from Blanquerna. Also, we made, also from students from Blanquerna, essentially students from journalism and from audiovisual communication. We also made another short documentary about a woman that arrived in Greece pregnant and how they live in a center for people with very small childs. And the third project that I think that was very, very interesting was a collaboration between Blanquerna, these students that went there, another school in Barcelona for drama, school called Eolia, and the young people, the non-accompanied minors that were living in the streets. They composed, they wrote a lyric for a song. Some people from the School of Drama composed the music, and we from our School of Communication, we made the video music. And they made this video music that was amazing. I wanted to show it to you, but we changed plans. But I'm sure that if somebody's interested in watching it, I can send it. I can send it to Greg Payne, and you can share it with everybody, because it's amazing, this video music, and also the 2 documentaries. After this, it happened the pandemic, we had to stop. But now, this year again, with the Observatory of Blanquerna, we made another project involving refugees. This project is called Rewards, and the idea is use media and cinema to reshape narrative on migration. Sorry, because I have this written, and I wanted to say exactly what is the project. This initiative brings migrants and refugees in the spotlight, giving them the chance to speak for themselves through the creation of a video about their issues, needs, and opportunities in their words. We are now working in this. 3 professors from Blanquerna, we went to Athens to shoot these people in collaboration with Cinepraxis. Cinepraxis is Ecumenical Refugee Program, is a non-profit organization of the Church of Greece. And they used to work in collaboration with us a lot of times. And this time we were doing this short documentary that we will be presenting it in the next meeting that we'll have talking about this, the needs of the refugees. And in this documentary, what we give is to give voice to them. They can talk of what were the problems that they faced when they arrived to Greece, what are the needs that they have, what are the policies that they need to be changed. And I think we have the responsibility, and we have the duty to give voice to these people that don't have any voice. So thank you very much, and I hope we can continue doing these kind of things.
Next, we have Dean Gracie Lawson Borders. Dean Lawson Borders was on my dissertation committee, so once again, I have this Howard connection going here. So welcome, Dean Lawson Borders.
Thank you. I'm going to spend my time. As you know, I'm Gracie Lawson Borders, and I'm the dean over at the Kathy Hughes School of Communications at Howard University. So it's a little bit of an old home week here, having 2 students who were in one of my courses that I taught on the doctoral level. But she asked us to briefly tell you why we're here, so let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a former journalist, last at the Chicago Tribune, so my jumping off point here is really from the First Amendment that I keep on my wall, which is blank now because my office is under construction, but somewhere in there it exists, and 2 of those 5 freedoms are the ones that have me here today, and that is freedom of speech and freedom of the press. I'm a humanist by nature, and I believe that it's important for people's stories to be told. And so I have the fortune to be a part of the school and to be able to work with faculty and students in making sure we're trying to tell those stories. As all my esteemed panelists are saying, and I'm lucky to be up here with such great people, is that it is about, telling the stories, changing the narrative, making sure we understand that there's a complexity for everyone in how things may have occurred. And so we have a great partnership with Emerson, a domestic exchange that we've had for several years now. So some of the Howard students can go to Emerson's campus or courses online and vice versa. We also have a program for film storytellers and those interested in entertainment, mini roles, called Amazon Entertainment, and they go to LA once a semester. And we also take classes at Emerson LA. So this collaborative nature of storytelling is why I'm here and why I know it's important, as you've heard from everyone, to give opportunity for voice. And so my conversation today is really about why storytelling and content development is important and why we have to seek all opportunities to make sure with this technology now and all of these platforms and the way digital platforms have enhanced that ability for us to hear more voices, that we have to do everything we can to support that. I'm proud to share that we'll have our election on November 8th. And there are a lot of things in the U.S. that are kind of centered around this election. We could be here all night. But our midterm election coverage of our journalism students will be over the entire DMV. And for those of you who are visiting, when we say DC and DMV, we mean Washington, DC, Virginia, and Maryland. And those students will go out all day, and they will cover across this whole 3-state and district, I guess I should call it, area. And that is about to get into some of these communities and talk about how what occurs on that election night impacts them. The importance of making sure that they understand what happens locally, to contextualize how it may impact their schools, their health, whatever it is. So I'll leave with that note and look forward to further conversation of, again, why I think narrative and storytelling is important, because I pivot from my true belief in the First Amendment in the U.S. of a free speech and a public press. Thank you.
Finally, we have Dr. J. Williams. I had heard so many stories about you, Dr. Williams, that so much so when we met today, I was like, I know who you are, because those stories were so vivid. So I asked you if you could come up here and if you can introduce yourself and share a bit about your expertise.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? Good, good. Special shout outs to HU. Before I came to Emerson, I was at Morehouse, and I have a lot of friends who went to Howard, so shout outs to Howard. I guess I'm here today because of my obsession with storytelling. I say I'm obsessed because I believe that stories changed my life. Going into Emerson as a student, I wanted to tell the stories. I wasn't sure the story that I wanted to tell for me, but I knew that I wanted to tell other stories, so I fell into filmmaking. And I absolutely love filmmaking. And then as I graduated in 2008, in the economic crash, I had to really figure out what I was going to do in terms of my own story. And since then, I've sort of been on this journey to figure out what my story is and how it manifests in the world. So that then led me to my doctoral journey, which was sort of the life-changing experience for me, as it was the first time that I had the courage to actually share with the world from my lens, in my words, in my voice, what my experience was. And it was in the form, my actual dissertation was in a form of an open letter to my undergraduate alma mater. And that was the first time that I was able to lift up my alma mater and share all the amazing things that I got from the institution and the great things that I've learned and the relationships that I built, but also the struggles that I had, the challenges I had with being a person of color, a black man in particular, in a predominantly white institution, and how that impacted the stories that I wanted to tell but felt that I couldn't because I wasn't in a safe space. So the title of my dissertation was America's Empathy Deficit, Our Bloody Heirloom and the Invisible Backpack. And the introduction of my dissertation opens with the same open letter that I used to get into the doctoral program, which then led me to sharing my experience in my research with working with students of color at my research site that gave them a space, students of color in particular, gave them a space to be able to share their stories. So the name of the program that I started was called the Creative Cafe. And I'll share a quick story with you. A lot of the research that I was doing, students were saying that they didn't feel like they could be heard, they could be themselves, they could be their full authentic selves in every space. And I sort of looked at what we don't see in Hollywood, what we don't see in mainstream media, and how higher education in particular plays a role in that. And so what I did was I wanted to create an environment and a space where students could not only be in a space with their peers and feel comfortable with the vibe, right? You know, black folks in particular, we like a vibe, right? It's music, food, it's being in fellowship. And in those moments, in creating that environment for the students and putting them with industry professionals from film, television, marketing, education, et cetera, there's this one moment that I share with you is why I think stories are so important. So we had this sort of like a speed friending exercise that I did with the students. And one of the questions on this sheet that you had to fill out, where these two students were sitting across from each other, and one of the questions said, if you were to have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? And I was sort of like ear hustling. I let the students do their thing, but I was standing over in the corner. I was watching these two students, and on the surface, these two students looked like they came from completely different worlds. One student had this beautiful garb on, her hair covered up, and we were still in mask mode, so everybody had a mask. And this other young lady, she had like a Tupac shirt, and she was like very, very hip hop. And one of the young ladies said, so if you were to have dinner with anybody, who would it be? And why? She said her grandmother, and she was like, oh, okay, because everybody was saying like Oprah or Ellen and all these like celebrities. And she said, my grandmother. And the young lady asked her, why? Why your grandmother? And she said, well, when I was growing up, I would sit with my grandmother every day and watch the soaps. And before her health declined, that was our moment for us to hang out. That was our time together. And her seeing how happy she was watching those soaps is what brought me to Emerson and brought me to this place, because I wanted to be able to write television shows and make people smile in their living rooms. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here because my grandmother had so much joy watching that, and I want to be able to learn how to do that, how to write stories, how to write for the screen. And it was in that moment that I realized that sharing your story with someone else gives that other person permission to share theirs. And I think stories, for me, is what makes us human. Those are the things that really unearth the nuances that you can't get by looking at somebody based upon their clothes or their skin color or their hair or their accent or whatever the case may be. And so I believe that stories are the thing that's going to bring us closer together. My research, how I operate in the classroom and encouraging other students from all walks of life to share their story, is something that I think is going to be one of the very few things that doesn't take a lot of effort. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take anything huge. It just takes a little bit of love, a little bit of empathy, and a little bit of patience to give someone the space to be themselves. Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing a little bit about yourself and the importance of telling stories. Now what we'll do is we'll open it up to the audience to ask questions from this group of experts about anything that they've shared or relating to storytelling and the importance of using storytelling to build bridges. Who wants to get us started?
This can be a question for all of you, but since you asked in your account of what you're using in the classroom, who would you have dinner with, dead or alive, and why?
For me, it would be Stevie Wonder. I would love to know you know, how someone who can't see has so much vision. And plus, I love his music. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate Emily's suggestion. If we can ask, if everyone can share their response to that question.
This is what happens when you're on panel with people who are professors. Well, for me now, it's a little sentimental because my mother is very ill and I can't have a conversation with her. I would like to have a conversation with her for the very reason that there are still things I need to ask her. And I would welcome the opportunity because she was such a guide and a leader for me and pushing me into the things that I'm doing, education, going on and pushing. So if I had a chance to have a conversation with her, that's what I'd like to do is finish some of the things that we started talking about because she was the one that was always my cheerleader and pushing me.
Wow, I don't know, but related to what we are doing about building bridge, or in general, to have dinner.
Whatever you're feeling.
Oh, this is very difficult. I would like, I don't know, as a film director, I would like to have dinner with some of the directors that I admire a lot, and I don't know, maybe I would like to have dinner with some Italian director from the neorealism and ask them how they did to create this new language. I don't know, Rossellini or Fellini or Vittorio De Sica. I would like very much.
This is a hard question. My father passed away.
Changing all the time.
Yeah, my father passed away when I was younger, and he's continued to impact me as an adult, like daily, and I even see his potential impact through me on my sons. So I think definitely my dad, because I just would want to talk to him as an adult, you know, like, and especially he passed away in 2001. So things have been so different since 2001. So just catching him up on that, I would love to do that. A famous person, probably Spike Lee. I know I mentioned we had a panel at Howard last week, but one of the films that really led me to pursue studying communications was School Days, which is like a film that was, I would say it was based on Morehouse, but I think that, yeah, and that might be realistic. Maybe I can have a conversation or dinner with Spike Lee one day. He seems very personable.
I will join you with Spike Lee. I would like to have dinner with him.
So Emily, that's a tough question. It's a good question, and I think all of us would love to speak to our dear ones that are passed. And often I do. It's usually a one-way conversation for the first time ever, especially with my dad. But that aside, when I think back of a historic, or at least a perhaps infamous figure, it might be Mark Twain. And he had so many amazing quotes. My favorite is, "It's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open it, prove the point." But apart from that, one of the things Twain did is he really looked at social issues and he brought them to life. He was an amazing author, but also an entertainer. I'd love to understand how his brain worked as a storyteller.
Thank you. I saw we had another hand up. Oh, sorry, wrong. I thought we had another hand up in the back.
Hi, I'm a journalism student at Emerson, and I also have a lot of friends who are in writing and publishing and also film. And something that comes up in all of our classes, as different as they are, is this issue of who gets to tell what stories. And I know we could have many panels on that. I think we could probably all agree that it's not limited enough that you can only tell the stories of the groups that you're a part of. That's pretty reductionist identity politics, but there is a lot of nuance to not appropriating other people's stories. I think the phrase "giving voice to the voiceless" was said earlier, and I think there's a lot to unpack there, as in who's truly voiceless, who truly has a voice to give. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that.
Could I start with that? That's a wonderful question. One of my comments earlier about the democratization of storytelling, with a smartphone and the knowledge of how to put together a story, you can move the world. In the past, it wasn't always that way, but due to technology, we can make it change. It's really as simple as it could be as simple as just creating a quick TikTok that isn't really formatted, or if we take the time to actually learn how story structure works. and perhaps have an objective with that story, you can persuade people, you can influence people, you can let them know how you're feeling, equally important, how other people are feeling. So there's such power in storytelling. The more people who understand, who can be proficient at this, I think the better we can be as a species.
As we said before with Mark, we only need a mobile phone to do this. I mean, to explain stories. So,
I think, sorry, your question was, what was it? How to?
Who gets to tell whose stories? Am I saying that in essence? Is that it? Who gets to tell whose stories?
Yeah, like where's sort of the line of where it crosses into appropriation?
I think the biggest thing is something that I think all of us in this room are supporters of, is just research and always willing to check yourself and be checked. I don't know if that's like a really general statement about that, but that's what I find is where people cross the line, is they're not willing to follow up on their whatever statements they're making or assumptions they're making about certain groups. Is just always be willing to learn.
I don't know, I will continue with what I said.
Jay, you wanted to
Yes.
add something?
I would say one of the things that I think are not spoken about more, particularly when you're talking about the voice and the voiceless, is not so much the stories that we tell each other, but more so the stories that we tell ourselves. Because I think a lot of times those who have traditionally been silenced have told themselves that they have to stay silent. And I think that's when this cultural appropriation, or all these different tropes that are spread and expressed across cultures, shared by the dominant culture, has created this story that we tell ourselves that we can't tell our own stories. And I think, that's for me what is the key. And a lot of this is empowering people to actually tell their own stories. So there is no space for that. You limit the opportunities for being silenced when you are continuously telling yourself that my story is relevant, my story is valued, my story is valid, my experiences are real and they are true and they are worth hearing. And so I think if we can put some more energy into empowering others to tell their story versus us just constantly telling others, if we can tell ourselves to raise your hand and say, this is my story and this is what I'm about, I think we could combat some of that. It's not the complete answer to it, but I do think it's a great starting point.
I concur, because I think all stories are important, and I think we have to make sure people know that they should, and that stories can be told in different ways. And I'm going to join Brittany in saying that it's important that you do the research. And so, because what we have with that phone, as Mark said, is something that allows people to do more than they've ever been able to do, all of these digital platforms, but still there are people who don't have that. And so I think when I think about when Moonlight was written and those two guys got together and told the story of growing up in their community, that was something that was in them and they had to get out. But just as well, if someone else is going to do that, they can do it as well by doing the research. I think what we were talking briefly in the hallway, and I always remind everyone that we are humans. And when we went through this pandemic the past 2 years, all of us went through it. We were all isolated. We were all put in different positions than we had ever been in. And some people struggled, and are still struggling with that. And so there are even stories that need to be told of overcoming what's next with that. But I think the key is knowing that voices do need to be heard. Our world, not just our society, wherever we all live, is very complex, and it's even more complex now when we think about all the things we're dealing with, supply chain and getting things and getting health care and all these things we've learned. So to your question, there's so many stories that need to be told to help give context to understand. I've got people who are out working with the people in Mississippi where there was no water. There is a very important story to tell there, not just if those folks who are not there, they need something to amplify and make sure it's told. In Flint, Michigan, that's atrocious what happened in Flint, Michigan. You know, I grew up in Michigan. They should not have had that kind of water situation. So those stories have to be told, and if they don't have the vehicle, someone does have to come and help and make sure that's being told. A quick aside, you know, our university was fortunate to receive a gift from James Patterson for a storytelling scholarship to students, both undergraduate and graduate, and I'm on that committee. And I'm going to do everything to push people to take advantage of that opportunity whenever a door opens, to grab it, so that you make sure that even if someone in the condition or place or wherever they're located, or immigrants, or, you know, migrating to places, we have to make sure we hear and understand the different levels of it. So that's what's important to me, and we have to do the research to make sure we're being true to what their story is.
Okay. Thank you. So I saw we have a hand over here, Katie.
So I guess kind of going off of the silent and the silenced, I guess, what do you guys think is the best way to reach people who you maybe don't think could listen or don't want to listen, or that you might not see eye to eye with in the matter that you're trying to highlight?
I'll answer that one quickly from being a former journalist. You just go out there. You know, doors are slammed on you. People won't let you in. You stand out. But, you know, people often joke about being a journalist. So since the journalist student is back there, I always felt when I was a working journalist, my role included being a part of capturing history while it was being made. And often I try to, since I'm in this role where I get a chance to talk to people, students, faculty, and everyone, I says, you really have to let people know the empathy that you can have for them. People are afraid. If people are in certain communities with limited resources, they're afraid. They're afraid if I say something, something will happen. They're afraid if I don't say something will happen. But a little bit of empathy goes a long way in helping them open up and say, but I do have a story that has to be told if I'm going to try to change the condition that they're experiencing, or they want to help others. So I think it starts with that empathy and some patience.
I think I heard from your question, like, how do you get people to care about something that they don't care about? And I'm not coming from a journalism background, but I think just working in PR for so many years, it's always like it's just meeting people where they are. So finding out what they do care about what you're talking about. So working with internet access issues, one of the things I talk about is the maternal health crisis. So a lot of people are like, well, if I don't have kids, I'm not interested in having kids, why should I care about the maternal health crisis? Well, it affects your bottom line. It has the potential to affect your bottom line. So I talk about it to some people from the standpoint of economics. Like, if you don't have a workforce, if you don't care about the maternal health crisis, it's gonna impact the workforce. So I just am always thinking about where I can meet people where they are, what they care about.
As humans, we have an amazing capacity for empathy. And if we can take the time to understand what other people are feeling or doing, there's the chance that we can learn from their experiences, their thoughts, their aspirations, whatever it might be, see something in their existence that we might recognize within our own, and then there's the chance to change. One of the powers of narrative structure, whether it's a 3-act structure, 5-act, 27, or Monroe's motivated sequence, you establish the need with people. The need is another way of saying the why. So if we're looking at somebody that believes in something completely different than yourself, well, okay, on that particular issue, there's a difference. If we ask what's behind that belief and we keep going, eventually we will find a place where we agree on something. And perhaps that's the place where we can start building a mutual story with some form of understanding. And yes, there will be issues that we will never be able to reconcile between certain groups. But perhaps in the process of the dialogue, we can get rid of all the animus that we see as of late.
Thank you for those responses. I think I saw a hand up over. Yeah. And then we go over to Jordan.
Thank you all for all this great information. So we've seen so many examples in the past of campaigns, brands that are doing a story that they think is authentic, turns out to be exploiting somebody or exploiting something or not being real. What questions do storytellers need to ask themselves, or what guardrails do we have to look to make sure that our story is real, knowing that once it's out there, anybody with any view can take it down or say it's not right or, blow it up? So what do you do to make sure your stories are real and authentic?
I know from a narrative perspective, research. It's understanding a truth. And this can get complicated because my truth and your truth, they're both truths, but they're different truths. But that said, it's doing the research, it's spending the time, doing the hard work to back up the story. The way I look at it in terms of the narratives I work in, the documentaries, it's that there are human truths involved. And that's what I try to work with. Of course, they can be interpreted any different way, but it's basically getting to what is the human truth behind all this, in the hopes that that's some form of common belief, common experience that we share.
I think that, of course, if you want to do a documentary, you need to know that this is true. But if you want to do fiction also, you need to do this research that you were saying. And the important thing is not to know if the story is real or not. I think that the important thing is to explain something that people can recognize themselves in it. That they can watch that movie and say, okay, what is happening to this character is what is happening to my sister, to me, or to my neighbor. And I think this is more important than if it's true or not. To make it true, to make it real. It's sometimes things happen in life that you think, if I put this in a movie, nobody will believe me because it's so strange that it's like, it's impossible that nobody will believe me, that character or that characteristic of the character or whatever. And then what I think is that make people recognize some things of what you are explaining.
I agree in terms of the documentary style, but I do think with fiction, I believe that belief or authenticity comes with diversity and experiences. I think the challenge with a lot of the things that people consume is that you see one dimension of a particular experience and that becomes the belief. That becomes the truth. And I think as Mark mentioned earlier, like that could be a truth for that particular person, but if you continuously see that same truth, that becomes the only truth. And I think if you have not only diversity in people on the screen, but a diversity of experiences on the screen or on the radio or whatever the medium is, I think that's when you begin to see the shift where people don't rely so much on the one thing that they've seen, but they've seen 20, 30, 40 different experiences representing that particular culture or that particular region or whatever the case may be, versus you only hear the one thing for that one culture in that one region over and over again, and then that becomes the story and the narrative that everybody believes, which I think strays away from the authentic experience of that human experience.
Yeah. We refer to that oftentimes in our class, and I see one of my students here, Catherine, the single story, the danger of the single story. We have time for one more question, and I know, Jordan, you had your hand up for a few minutes.
So I feel like today we get a lot of stories that kind of have negative or harmful impacts on like community. Like it promotes like trauma porn in both fiction and documentary style tellings. So how do you like promote just like a positive, like impactful story without like just overwhelmingly putting in like just kind of just revealing the truth of behind a person's experiences without overwhelmingly putting in just a feeling of sadness, and just making sure everybody comes out with a positive impact on like the people that you're telling the story and also the people that you want the story to go out to.
I'm going to take a shot at how complicated our lives are as humans, and there are some stories that are tragic. We are looking at publishing one now. We have a student-run news service, HU News Service, and it goes out on a wire, and anyone can pick those stories up, as well as they put some of the broadcast piece on YouTube. And there's one story we're thinking of now that they're looking at, and it is a sad story. It's about mental health and what happens when people are not able to get the help that they need. But it's also an inspiring story because it inspires someone to try to do more to help others. So I go back to what you said, is that we have to have more than just one leg of a story. Whether it's documentary work, whether it's fiction, whether it's actually reporting on something that's occurring, we have to have enough of almost that prism that we're trying to show different aspects of it so that people can understand that through that human experience, there's something that can be gleaned from it. And then we also have the realistic, tragic, and challenging stories that we have to help people move. The reason you guys hear me giving Flint, Michigan as an example, because I grew up over there in Detroit, and knowing that just up the road that there are young people now who have this in their system, this water that should not have been poisoned like that. And so that means we weren't telling enough story what was happening from a bureaucratic standpoint with that government to say that they would let them put this in the water. And so, you know, the story has that element, but it also has what does it bring people together to say we don't want that to happen again. When you think of the civil rights movement in the US, it was media and people going and telling those stories from the black press on and saying you have to really see what's occurring and putting those visuals through film and news to say, here you have to have this story. If we think of what's happening in Ukraine, we have to hear all those stories. We have to hear those people who have struggled, who have lost loved ones, and also what it has made occur in so many people who have stood up and say, I will be a part of pushing back on this. So I think we're complicated, but then what we do is we make sure we give enough of a variety of stories to help people give a context to it. And so I've been quoted as saying this, and I'll say it again, you overwhelm them with the truth. That's how you get people to a different place.
Anyone? So I think, no, I appreciate all of the questions, thank you, but I also want to be mindful of the time allotted for the other panel. So as I mentioned, Jordan's question was the last, so I want to thank the presenters once again for your invaluable contributions, and thank you all for participating and asking the questions that you did. So we'll now get ready to transition into the next panel, which is entitled Master Storytellers in Sports. Thank you very much, everyone.